the Community Pulse podcast. We are talking once again about burnout, and this is our second episode. I'm PJ Hagerty, at a splenic on Twitter.
I'm Mary Thengvall, at Mary_Grace on Twitter.
And I'm Jason Hand, at Jason Hand on Twitter.
And if you're with us for the last episode, you know that we were talking a bit about burnout, kind of the definition, where we find it, how it works. And in some ways, we started to speak about how to recognize it. We have our guests, John and Jessica, who, why don't you introduce yourselves once again for those people who may have missed the first podcast?
Sure. Jessica Fish, at Fishica on Twitter, and I am an activist, educator, and community builder. I work for Leader Networks, which is a research and strategy firm for communities and digital initiatives. And I have been doing mindfulness, diversity and inclusion work for about 10 years.
John Willis, Botchgaloop on Twitter, kind of all things DevOps, I guess. Work at Docker right now, but basically a startup guy, but very interested in this topic of burnout and health and diversity and
all the things.
I think all of these things, I mean, essentially traveling around, all of these things lead into one thing, which is a better community and a better, tech community, not just DevOps or DevRel. It doesn't really matter as long as it's part of a better community. One of the things that we wanted to start with is kind of, how do you spot signs of burnout? Like when you see it, I know that in the interim break there, Jason was saying, if you walk up to him and he's spotted in his face that things are starting to go south. What are the red flags that are kind of universal that you see as someone who's clearly burning out?
I'll take a first crack at it. There's this woman, Jerry Polio, has this BDoc, which is really interesting. And she talks about frustration, moving to anger, moving to apathy, then moving to burnout. And so, like, good example, if I ran into Jason at a conference, and we see each other quite often, and he said he was, oh my goodness, I was just so on the road. This has been crazy. I'd be okay. Well, the club. But if Jason is really, really passionate, so if I went to him and said, have you seen the latest thing about Kinevin? And his response back was like, who gives a shit? Right. Then I'd actually be, whoa, wait a minute. Something's not right there with, and I've had that with me where, Gene is a good friend of mine, Gene Kim, the Phoenix Project and all that, where I've had my kind of bouts getting really close to burnout, and your friends will notice. That, you can tell really quick, if I'm not talking about a certain thing with things, people that know me are going to know really quick, whoa, why is John not interested in this subject? So I think that's trying to identify that kind of, that kind of curve that Jerry Polio does, like from frustration. Frustration is, I'm just tired of traveling. Anger is, damn it, those people make me travel all the time. Apathy is like, you know what? I don't even want to talk about this, Kinevin or complexity theory. Like, what now, John?
Jessica, what do you see some of the signs of burnout being?
So it can range from everything from, insomnia to having trouble keeping up at work, just this constant feeling of dread, everything from like the apathy to anger John was just talking about, to also, either the beginnings or the exacerbation of things like anxiety, depression, a pulling away from colleagues. I've also really seen it manifest, especially amongst our age group, as an increased dependency on drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, I think that's key. I've noticed from my personal perspective that, especially in the community field, but in technology in general, people tend to stay really connected. So you're seeing them, at conference and events, and you're seeing them, on Twitter and talking about, this is, like John was saying, check out this really cool thing Docker just made, Kubernetes is amazing, blah, blah, blah. And you see all this. And then if you suddenly see like a decrease in that, I think that's a huge red flag when I think that's the beginning, is like you can see someone starting to disengage. And yeah, sometimes just like I needed a break, so I stepped away. But I think that to me, that's a huge thing that makes me say, maybe I should at least reach out and say, hey, haven't seen you around in a while. What's going on?
I think some other things too, because these are things that happen to me, and I know a lot of it really is just it's more exhaustion than burnout. But I think exhaustion can be an early indicator of things going south. But there have been times where I wake up, at a hotel and don't even know what city I'm in, or I can't find my truck in the airport parking lot. My memory just starts to just let go of things that it seemed to think weren't important, because I'm trying to think about too many other things. I'm too stressed out about, just too many balls in the air, too many projects, but also it's more than that. It's the physical effects that happen when you're constantly traveling and switching time zones and up early and to be in an event and then to bed late. There's a lot of, a lot of the things that John and I talk about just within our DevOps community is about contributing factors. There isn't really this one thing that's going to cause burnout. There's lots of things.
Right.
And for me, it's paying attention to all those lots of things, which is oftentimes really hard because there are a lot of little things that you're just like, maybe I just, didn't quite get enough sleep, or I had too much coffee and I'm feeling anxious right now. It's probably a lot of stuff, actually.
Right. I think one of the things for me, and you touched on this, but the exhaustion factor of, I'm someone who tends to be fairly outgoing, fairly involved in activities, fairly involved in, oh, hey, this thing's going on over there. Let me go check it out. And the second that I start to see both personally and professionally, like, oh, there's stuff going on. Nope. Like, sorry, not going. No, I really don't care about that concert that I bought tickets 2 months ago and was super excited about. Or no, I really am not going to go to that after party tonight at the conference that I'm at, even though my friends are there and I never get to see them except at conferences.
Right.
Like stuff like that for me is really the like, oh, okay, there's a problem. And I mean, sometimes like genuinely, hey, I'm recovering from a cold. I really shouldn't be out again tonight. That's different, right? It's the, no, I don't care. I don't want to go. There's nothing really preventing me from going. There's no real reason why I shouldn't, but I don't care enough to.
And I think that also ties into what Jessica was saying there is a lot of times, and I know that Mary, you may have seen me do this, like a lot of times they compensate, like, I don't want to be at the event, but I have to be at the event. So I'm going to drink a lot at the event. And that's kind of how it goes. And I mean, not that I believe I have a problem. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. That's a whole other episode. But our culture lends to the fact of if there is a problem, we're masking it. Am I burning out? No, I'll just have a few more drinks and I'll feel better about it. And I think maybe that even leads into, because I mean, alcohol doesn't solve problems, kids. That leads into what John was saying about the more severe issues of clinical burnout, which often stem from clinical depression and not being recognized and saying, oh, I go to these events and I get a little bit buzzed, I get a little bit drunk. Next thing I know, I'm going on stage. Before I go on stage, I'm going to take a shot. Not a big deal. Now I don't even want to talk about these things. I just want to drink. And now I'm considering, checking out for the rest.
Well, one of the things that I think is good, I think, it'll sound like I'm bragging, but I think that article did can open a part of our industry because not only a lot of people talking about it where we weren't really talking about it, but I see this happen a lot now on like Twitter, or like somebody will ping me and say, John, did you just see such and such's tweet? I know you know him really well. Can you see if everything's okay? It happens a lot. And then even myself, I'll do some wacky tweet and I'll literally get a couple of DMs going, are you okay? And I don't mind that, right? Because we're kind of on watch for our friends, right? And that's really cool, right? And so I think that's good. Where I get calls from people and say, have you talked to so and so lately? I just had a conversation with her or him, and like that didn't sound good, and I don't know him well enough, right? So I think there's a lot of that going on. I did want to say one other thing, that going back to that MBI we talked about in the last, the Maslach burnout inventory. That the things that are easier is exhaustion and cynicism. Right? Exhaustion, we can see it, right? We can see cynicism in the sense of depersonalization. Like a good example would be my Kinevin thing, where if Jason said, I don't give a shit about Kinevin or complexity, right? And I know, whoa, something ain't right. The efficacy is the silent one, because that's between you and this fantasy of what you think your job is respecting or not respecting, right? Because you start getting into this struggle of, they don't think I'm worth this, right? You can't really, there's not many people you have that conversation with. Like, my company really doesn't respect me, and this organization, and you can, like, again, to play armchair psychologist for the young man who committed suicide, if you saw his 24-hour tweet stream, it was clearly he was struggling and battling this notion of what he thought his responsibility was as a sysadmin. And, and so that's the one I really do worry about, because I think that's the one that happens really fast. Or in our view, wait a minute, I just talked to Bill a week ago. But what you don't know is Bill for 6 months was having this mental battle, this silent struggle with, which again, in the clinical set basically becomes, and I've been there. I took the MBI and I was, fire engine red on efficacy. And the report that you get when you take it for $15, it says, if you're in this area, go see a psychiatrist. Anyway, so
I think that leads in nicely to kind of the next question is, so we figured out how we spot it. What do you do? You realize somebody's going, off the rails. Well, maybe not off the rails, but things aren't going well. They're clearly on fire, if not completely burning out. Jessica, what do you do? Do you jump in? Do you make that call, or how do you go gently into the night, so to speak?
All right. Well, I'm going to approach this from a slightly different perspective, and instead of it being like me seeing it in a friend, a lot of the communities that I work with are brand or B2B or associations, and I'm working with community managers who are spotting this or getting disclosed this kind of stuff from their members. And so we have I would love to see this be a deeper part of community management training, of this kind of like triage response. So there are some communities that have it, really well set up. Like, this is what you do if somebody discloses that they're in, some deep, psychological trauma or harm or concern. And so, a couple of the things are to respond, to listen, to keep them talking, to acknowledge that you care, and then to find, appropriate resources. Again, they might range in scope and size, and I've got a list, and maybe that's something we can put in show notes, because there are so many organizations out there that folks can call or text now to get additional support. So that can be part of it, and then I guess I can't overemphasize the importance of not making judgments, of not trying to diagnose, of just really being a completely open ear, and asking them what they need for support, and reaffirming their value, how much they mean to you, and then keeping tabs. Right. The issue is I think a lot of times we'll check in on somebody, and they tell us, "Oh, I'm fine. It was just a bad day." And then we forget to check back in 2 days later or a week later. And in my experience, that's where the rubber really hits the road, is like, I'll put it, if someone in my life is really struggling, I will actually put it in my calendar, check in.
Brilliant. And I think all of that above, that's, awesome advice. And then what I would add too is, one of the things we did, a burnout open space and interrupt, right? Like, imagine that, right? Hardened network people, but it was in Vegas, and they brought in somebody who ran a suicide prevention center in Vegas, right? And so he just listened to the whole thing, and he didn't say anything because he didn't want to he didn't know what was appropriate. In the end, I asked him, I said, can you give us your feedback? And a couple of things he said, one of the things is, to the point of no judgment, but there's a silent judgment. In other words, if somebody says, I'm doing this, and you say, oh, you're okay. Everybody does that. Like, that's not telling them that you're connecting with their feelings. You're actually telling them that they're different, because at that point, when they're in that clinical zone, they don't believe it's everybody. It's just them in this spiral cycle. And anything you say and you're just trying to be nice, to helpful, like, but no, you shouldn't feel bad. Everybody does that, right? And so you need to clearly stay away from that. Everybody, or you're okay, or you just
kind of stay away from that normalizing the situation.
Yeah, no. And in fact, here's the second part, which plays in this really well, which I would have never realized this is most people think that asking, "Are you committing suicide?" is something that would be scary to ask, or maybe even like force them to go down a path. He was saying that's the greatest question you can ask, because that actually, if they are, he says you see this like just body drop going, oh my God, you understand what I'm going through. So that was one I never, I would have never thought, I would have totally not been the person, even to a pretty close friend, to say, let me ask you, are you contemplating suicide? And if that's what they're thinking, that might be the best question you can actually ask. And then, straight to, if you have to drive them or state like checklist, come back every whatever, get them to some clinical help, right? Like that whatever you got to do, go pick them up, drive them, hold their hand, not let them go, do whatever you have to do to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah, John, no, I absolutely second that. I think it's a responsibility that we all have to get better about asking that question. I was just reading this morning, the rate of suicide amongst teen girls has quadrupled in the last 10 years. They're kind of equating it to the rise of social media. And, that question is so important. And I throw it out there a lot with folks. And, if it's not on the table, then it's like, no. But if it is, like that is a really profound piece of information to have. And that sets me on a whole different, triage plan.
And it sets them, right? Because they're like, oh my God, you actually, as opposed to, everybody gets this. You're like, where I'm at, right? Like you become that, like, you get this connection. Unfortunately, unfortunately, I haven't had that chance, but the way he was actually a pastor and ran a suicide, the way he explained it, it was so clear that how appropriate that question is.
It sounds like almost that we need to become not only a lot more vigilant and just watching, for those who we care about and work with and that kind of stuff. But also we ourselves maybe have to step outside of our own comfort zones and ask some things that just seem a little bit difficult to ask, or engage in conversations, or, reach out to somebody that you don't really know that well. And that sometimes is hard, but to just be a good person means you put that comfort that you're used to aside to do the right thing. Something I feel like I've been struggling with and trying to do much better here recently with, a lot of the election stuff. But I think it's kind of the same type of deal, is that these can be difficult questions and conversations, but they will actually make things better if you just get that thing started.
Well, I think it's tough culturally too, because as Americans, especially, I was raised in a close-knit Irish Catholic family, as you do, and there it's like feelings. No, we don't have those, and we don't talk about them, and we'll worry about that at your wake. But other than that, it's you don't talk about. So trying to bring about in myself the ability to reach out to people and say, hey, you look like, you are not having a good time of it anymore. And you don't want to be places, and you are slowly disappearing from the radar. I want you on my radar. But I have to take that step. And I think that's the key. And I think that's what both John, Jessica, and Jason, could we have gotten another J name for this episode? But John, Jessica, and Jason are saying, we need to be advocates on behalf of our own selves in order to be advocates on behalf of other people.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, is we are advocating so often for other people that we as community people have the wrong impression, I'll say that from the start, the wrong impression that we always have to have it together. That we always have to be the ones that are okay. We always have to be the ones that are reaching out to others. And well, if we aren't okay, then we can't do our jobs right. And that's not an okay thing.
And that's where the fear of admitting it kind of comes in too.
Exactly.
It's and I've seen it so many times that just simply getting up on stage and saying, or writing a blog post, similar to what John did, getting up on Twitter and being like, hey, I'm not okay. I'm totally not okay right now. I am fucking falling apart.
Right.
But one of the things that, wanted to kind of the things that was really interesting early on was there was a woman over in Europe during that kind of first couple of days after I wrote the blog article. People could send me, you need to watch this woman's video, and I'll dig it out and put it in the show notes. But one of the things that she talked about her experience with burnout, but she talks about this story about being vulnerable, and vulnerable in, like, you can be vulnerable in not writing a blog article. There's a young man who talked about depression at DevOps Days New York. He was vulnerable. But vulnerability also could be just being silly, right? Like, so this woman talked about how she just liked being silly, and she every day she would, these automated doors, she'd physically open them, and there was an exchange student from Asia there, and he'd watch her for like the first 3 or 4 days, and finally got the courage to go up to ask her, like, I know those doors open, and it was, language translation issues and all that, right? And he says, I know that those doors are automatically open, but why do you open them? And then she explained to him that she was just being silly. And then 2 days later, he came in and asked, like, how come everybody puts Christmas trees in their, or trees, not trees in their house from November, December? And like, he didn't understand it, but he didn't know anybody he could talk to, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the meta point there is trying to figure out your version of mine as being silly and approachable. And most people know that, I'm not the kind of, because I'll do silly things, and that I think opens up people to be more likely to talk to me. Yours might be just telling the story about your depression or your anxiety. But I think that opens up that availability for people to feel that psychological safety to want to be able to tell you something that they might not. Hey, I'm an Irish Catholic. I'm the same way. We sing guitar at our wakes, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
it's lyrics and songs, and nobody said, because this is not allowed.
And it's been a hard thing for me, but my vulnerability is being kind of silly, which gets people to, and I think we need to, and obviously, like Jessica said, we need to listen like there's no tomorrow. Listen.
Right.
But being vulnerable allows people to feel like that they might have that psychological safety approach with something that could be kind of not on a straight line conversation.
Well, so while we have the time, maybe we can kind of shift gears a little bit into whether or not this type of stuff is preventable, because I think there may be some question if it's completely preventable, but or should we just be absolutely prepared to deal with it when we notice it? But maybe let's start with Jessica. Like, in terms of prevention, is there anything that we should be thinking about? We talked about before the show, dividing this up into topics that are more about the professional side of things and preventing it, and then also your own interpersonal ways of dealing with type of stuff. So can you give us maybe your thoughts on what can be done, if anything, to prevent this type of thing?
Yeah. All right. So I've got some of my top strategies that I'm going to share, and I think that these speak to kind of beginning stage burnout, but much more deeply to the stress specific to community managers, and also that kind of idea of overwhelm that after a long time can definitely snowball into more serious things. So one of the first things I want to share is I really believe that we wake up in the morning with kind of a set amount of mental and emotional calories. This is why President Obama wears like the same suits. They're laid out the night before so that he doesn't have to waste mental calories on what I'm going to wear that morning. And so if you kind of think about yourself in that way, like I've got a tank, and on a given day, my tank might be less because of stuff that's going on in my life, or because I'm terrified of what happened in the election, and I'm probably going to lose my insurance, and there's all of this other stuff swirling around, and so that's one part of it. The other part is to really think about how you are organizing your day at work. And so one of the things that is a fantastic strategy is to think about how to reorder your day. So if you start with tasks that get you fired up, that you like, and that actually primes your brain to stay in that mode longer throughout the day. A tip that I like to keep that kind of high vibe and energy going throughout the day is to really take some time to think about the space that you inhabit while you work. So researchers have found that people who stash a couple photos, tchotchkes, things that help their memory, even subconsciously connect to memories that warm their hearts. Their blood pressure is better throughout the day. You get a tiny little dopamine hit every time you see those. So I really encourage people to take an hour and just figure out what can my desk look like. I saw a woman last week in Boston, and her cube was filled with like beautiful rocks and crystals, and like, it was amazing. And you know, other people who like have candy and photos from all their favorite vacations. I know it sounds like a little thing, but it really works for folks. Another couple just, you know, really tangible things. Take all of your vacation time. Figure out how to do it. Sit down with your calendar, you know, between the Christmas and January session there, and really figure out what you're going to do. The majority of millennials are not taking all of their vacation time, and this is super detrimental. And again, multiple research endeavors have shown that when you take vacation, you actually come back more creative, more innovative, and with a lot less resentment. I also recommend that folks look at their workday and schedule at least an 8 to 10 minute break after every 90 to 100 minutes of work. Ideally, it would be even shorter periods, but you know, to get up, to move your body, to walk around, and you know, and then there's all sorts of, you know, the things that we always hear, you know, the physical activity, sleeping, breathing. A lot of us hold our breath while we go through our emails. That's a condition that's called email apnea. Because for a lot of us, our flight response gets activated where we're nervous. We see that email come in from the boss's boss, and all of a sudden it's, you know, the tiger is after me. Like, that is actually how our brain responds to that kind of stuff. So I constantly will have a Post-it on my screen that says breathe. My, you know, computer login for a long time was breathe something, so that I was typing that in and would remember to take a deep breath. I'm a big fan. There are so many apps now as well that can help you enter into the foray of mindfulness and meditation practices. You know, a lot of folks really love Headspace. Another free app is called Insight Timer, which has a ton of guided meditations as well. And you know, those can last everywhere from like 3 minutes to an hour. What else do I have on here? You know, another thing that I feel I have to touch on is just the importance of also recognizing like the socio and cultural phenomenon that is happening, especially now in our country, and you know, how that impacts all of us in our work lives, and that, you know, all of us hold a ton of different identities, whether it be across gender, race, sexual orientation, ability, and those all come into play when we're talking about any of this. And I think, you know, now more than ever, and to understand the makeup of who we are. You know, I talked in the last episode of like showing up to work holistically, and how can we create organizations that are not just looking at diversity as like checkboxes, but are really inclusive in creating, you know, power structures that are inclusive, that everybody's opinion is welcome at the table. And I think that would also go a long way to help us normalize conversations about everything we've been talking about and take some of the taboo away.
Right. It's always amazing to me how much those seemingly little things, and I say seemingly because I don't actually think they're little things, but how much those seemingly little things make a difference, right? Like remembering to breathe. Cool. Sounds simple enough, sounds easy enough, but it's something we don't do. Mm-hmm. Like similar to your Post-it note that was reminding you to breathe. I have one on mine that, and I'm not even sure where I found this originally, but it's an acronym for STOP. And it's stop, take 3 deep breaths, observe body sensations, thoughts, and emotions, and then proceed, figure out how I should respond. And doing that when I would run into issues with, opening my inbox in the morning and I have 70 new emails and going, oh, I'm never going to get through my day. And how am I going to do this? And I'm never going to be able to get everything done. And like, wait, no, hang on. Okay. How do I tackle this? What am I feeling? How do I work through it? And then how do I proceed? Because I will get through it and I can get through it, but how do I approach it in a way that actually helps me acknowledge, no, I can do this, versus just, okay, fine, I have to do it. And how do I get it done? And I'm never going to be able to do everything. And resetting that mindset can be such a huge, huge deal.
I was just going to add a couple of things. One is, on the how to deal with friends, the World Health Organization has these videos called the Big Black Dog. And one of them is a really good one for tell you how to deal with a friend or a loved one that's got depression. It's amazing. The other one is just helping, people who are in depression. So I think those are two good videos. A book that's come up quite often in DevOps open spaces on burnout. I was reluctant for the first part of the year to recommend a book to anybody, but it came up by a lot of other people, and it was a book that helped me years ago with depression. It's Dr. Burns' Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy. Actually exercises to kind of filter the way you think. And then one last thing, which is the mindsets. If you haven't, talking about stress and things like that, there's actually three great researchers. Carol Dweck is probably the foremost on mindsets. And then there's a woman called Alea Crum. And then a more recent, Kelly McGonigal. She's got a book called The Upside of Stress. I actually recommend you following these researchers in reverse order. So start with Kelly McGonigal on stress. And what you'll find is how you think about, the way you think about in your frontal cortex, how you deal with, how you think about something as kind of a learning or a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. It's amazing stuff. And how you can actually make stress, it flows right into the whole anti-fragile. You can actually use stress to make you stronger. And it's amazing how these kind of mindsets, the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, how simple, just in short, the original Carol Dweck did all this stuff with students, where they took students who were in economically depressed areas who thought they had no hope. And they basically taught them through very short exercises growth mindsets, and the statistical data on the difference is amazing. And you go all the way back to Kelly McGonigal, who talks about how we could actually, us, the people on this podcast and people listening, could use stress as kind of a weapon.
Awesome. We'll definitely make sure those are all in the show notes.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to add, I know we're getting short on time here and we'll start wrapping up, but something else I think it's important for us to mention, especially if, let me just start over. When I started the job of evangelist, or when I was interviewing for the job of evangelist, I was told right up front, this job has an 18 to 24 month life cycle. Most evangelists will burn out within 18 to 24 months, which I thought was very interesting, that there was somehow an already perceived known amount of time before I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I can't do it for whatever reason. And I think too, not that that's a bad thing to present that up front. I think that's good information that I'm glad I knew about, because it sets my own expectations on what I should be paying attention to. But I think something about that needs to be shared within the hiring process of everyone's jobs. Mm-hmm. I think that especially within the industry, the software industry, we see a lot of times in job descriptions that we're looking for the next JavaScript rock star, or system admin ninja, and all these they're setting expectations that we need a hero, and that we want you to be the hero, and that you are going to have these expectations of just, saving the day constantly. And I think we create that when we set up the job description. And so people come in thinking, well, this is what the job description said, that I'm supposed to be the hero here. And anyway, I just see a lot of people saying, in their marketing messaging, in their hiring tactics, and in their hiring language, they're looking for rock stars. And so then we try to be a rock star, and we just can't. It's just not possible. So just, if you know anybody who's looking to hire people and you're going to be somehow involved with writing the job description, or you have friends in your HR department, just maybe spread that around and say, we've got to stop with this, this language about looking for the next superhero within our company. And the hero culture has just, that's caused so much more problem than good.
Yeah, kind of the idea that's moving by the wayside now, the idea of the 10X programmer. There's no such thing as a 10X programmer. Stop looking for one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and this comes back to building inclusive community, which is collaboration, right? Like you might not have the rock star programmer, but can you assemble a rock star team?
That's a perfect
And are they
example.
going to accomplish more if they feel like many hands make light work? And so the collaboration model, like, we've really got to get back to thinking about, not everybody is going to be this out of the box, super creative, funky thinker. But if you have one or two, okay, how do we support their skill set in a way that the whole thing becomes more sustainable for everybody?
I know I'm going to butt in, this go longer, but it's something I've been wanting to research, and I finally over the weekend started doing it. Google spent 5 years trying to answer one question of research, and it was, what makes a great team? And the answer was psychological safety. And they spent 5 years with anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, engineers. They looked at over 150 years worth of work in the industry, and they came up with that's the top tier, but the bottom line is that the best teams in all their studies were the ones that had a high psychological safety. It means that anybody felt safe to object to, and there was no rock star, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And the truth of the matter is, like, most people don't feel safe at work. I love that. That Google research is phenomenal. And what is it? It's like 2/3 of Americans, their biggest complaint about their job isn't the work, it's their boss. Because they don't feel safe.
Right.
And that safety plays into a lot of being able to say, hey, I feel like I have too much on my plate. Or, hey, can I sit down and talk to you about my priorities, because there's some things that are going to slip, right? Like that safety of being able to know that I can go to my manager and say, I can't do everything, and not worry about getting fired or being put on a performance plan or any of those things, of just saying, I have too much on my plate. I have too much going on. I can't handle this amount, and not being concerned about the repercussions of that.
Absolutely.
Along those lines, one of my favorite things that I was asked in the interview for the job that I'm at currently was, what's the one thing that you never want to do again? What's the one thing that you've had to do in the past professionally that you never want to do again? And that, to me, is such a huge question. It's such a huge indicator. And so often we're asked, like, what are the things that motivate you? What are the things that you really enjoy doing? What kinds of things do you use to keep you excited about your job? But we so rarely ask people, what burns you out?
Yeah.
What do you not want to do? What do you not want to be
What
involved
makes you miserable?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And having that clear picture of, cool, this person on my team is super motivated by X, Y, and Z. They're super, super demotivated and burned out and unhappy when they have to do these things. Like
Expense reports.
Yes, for me it's logistics. Like being able to have that whole holistic picture of your team allows you to be able to create those rock star teams, if you will, of, cool, we have someone on the team who's responsible for these aspects, and someone on the team who's responsible for this thing over here, and together they can do this amazing project. But none of them have to be doing the things that we know will burn them out and that we know will make them miserable. And they all get to stay really driven and really excited about what they're doing.
On that note, I think we need to wrap it up.
Yep.
But we should take a look at, usually in episodes, we kind of mention things off the topic that we'd like people to check out. We didn't do that in the last episode because this is a continuation. So you see what we did there. So why don't we start, Jessica? What's something that of interest to you outside of maybe what we do, but something that you think people should take a look at?
Something you've been enjoying lately.
Something, yes.
Oh, I got answers to that. Okay.
Okay, good.
First of all, everybody has to go watch Insecure featuring Issa Rae on HBO. It's amazing. It centers the lives of 2 young Black women, and it's phenomenal. Likewise, there is a phenomenal new news website that is being run. It's been funded and is run completely by women, and a lot of women of color. It's called The Establishment. And it's just rocking my world.
Awesome.
Fantastic. John?
Oh man, I wanted. What's the video that it's about women in coding in their industry, and it's everybody tells me it's amazing, but you have to get a quorum. They don't show it publicly anywhere. You have to get an organization that I'm trying to. I just saw it yesterday too, and it gnaws at me because apparently it's a very well done of why. What the problems are in our kind of male-centered culture of technology, and I just can't find a quorum to get people. But
if you can find the information, we can definitely put it in the show notes. So everybody,
yeah,
maybe we'll reconvene all 5 of us, and that'll be enough of a quorum to be able to watch.
Yeah, no, you have to get a theater. I mean, it's the only place you have to.
Okay, so more than 5 of us then.
Yeah, well, you just having enough people to say you're going to show it at a theater somewhere. So.
Right. We'll definitely put that in the show notes. Jason, what about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
Gosh, I've been traveling so much. I haven't really had much time to myself to enjoy some. I'm trying to think of something I haven't suggested previously. The one things I definitely want to put out there are still sort of related to today's topic, and that is there is a free app that I use lately to just sort of chill out and meditate, and it's called Calm, CALM. It's a pretty good app. It does have some in-app purchases, but it's been pretty nice. And then another thing, actually, I think John maybe told me about this a long time ago, is it's a thing on Netflix called Happy. It's just a movie documentary thing.
It's great.
It's really good. Not necessarily about burnout and stuff, but just, kind of just different ideas about how to stay happy under all kinds of circumstances. I think it's just a good little piece. Gosh, I think that's really it as far as right now. I'm feeling like I'm just kind of getting back into the flow of normal life here. So
I just found that it's called Debugging the Gender Gap. It's called Debugging.
I have seen that. Someone presented it as a conference. It is absolutely amazing.
But you got to get a group to do it. Yeah.
So maybe if you're a conference organizer and you're listening, consider maybe a night before, a night activity where you can rent out a theater and get some sponsor to do it. It is absolutely 100% worth it.
Cool. Very cool. So PJ, what about other things you've been enjoying lately?
Well, I do feel like, I know I mentioned this when we were talking about it beforehand, but I feel like every time we do this, I mention some new album.
Okay.
But this is wicked important. So Tribe Called Quest, after 20 years, finally came out with a new album. It features, it's a tribute to Fife, who had passed away, one of the members of the tribe. It's called We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service. Amazing tracks. Jack White is involved. Elton John on a hardcore rap album, one of the best, Solid Walls of Sound, one of the best songs on the album. It's absolutely amazing. I think everyone should check it out. And it will absolutely bring your stress levels down. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, you've definitely got Jessica's support.
Yeah. For those of you just listening to the audio and not watching the video, there were hands in the air. There was
dancing. Well, that gives me the music that I need to download for my flight today. So I appreciate that.
It is available on Spotify. So
perfect.
It's really easy to grab.
Oh, also one last plug for the podcast, Politically Incorrect.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. For me, things I've been enjoying lately, one is not necessarily a thing, but it's something I've been doing. I made a list a couple weeks ago when I was starting to feel the tendrils of overwhelmedness popping back up again, was made a super short list of things, small things that make me happy. So heading down to the beach on a mid-afternoon break, I'm lucky enough to live 10 blocks from the beach in San Francisco. And so heading down there for a quick walk midday, or finding a new book that I can read in my spare time, or spending time with friends, or making someone laugh. So things that are relatively simple and small things, but things that fill me back up, if you will, rather than the things that are taking my energy away. So that's something that I've really been trying to be conscious of lately and doing more of. The other thing that's completely unrelated to anything burnout or tech at all is I've been completely reliving my childhood by watching Gilmore Girls before the new episodes come out. They might have just been released, or they'll be released while I'm on this trip. So I'm waiting until I get through the rest of the seasons, and then I'm gonna binge watch those on a Saturday or something. But
Yeah, girl.
That is only fair to yourself. Make sure you're caught up 100%.
Exactly.
I had a lot of people make fun of me when the new X-Files episodes came out. I was like, I'm literally watching episode 1 through all of season 9 and the movies, and they're like, that's crazy. I'm like, I just want to make sure I'm at the right starting point.
You have to be. You have to have all the context, no matter how much you watched in the past. You got to have all the context before you watch the new ones.
Exactly. You might miss some subtle nuance.
That's right.
Exactly.
I misspoke before. The podcast is politically reactive with W. Kamau Bell.
Okay. Politically reactive. Sounds good.
And we'll get all this in the show notes, and we will get links to these things, and hopefully we can link them in the video once the video is processed. And
can I say one last thing?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I did something I haven't done in years. I subscribed to the New York Times, and I want to pay them more than, I tried to get their free 3 months free. I didn't want to pay it. We're going to need now more than ever a news organization that's willing to fight against whatever we're about to go into. And so I think anybody who feels like me right now, based on last week, I think it'd be good advice to make sure that organization stays healthy financially.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. Support your causes. I think that's the key. And with that, I think we're coming to a close on another episode of the Community Pulse podcast. I'm PJ at Isplenic on Twitter.
I'm Mary at Mary_Grace on Twitter.
And I'm Jason at Jason Hand on Twitter.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you for the next episode.